Everybody have a copy of the maps? They're out on the banister if you need a copy of the maps. It is great to see everyone here this morning. Before we begin our Bible study, we just need to make sure we keep all those people that are sick, those that have procedures coming up. Basically, they're too numerous to name, but there's just a lot of folks out sick, so keep those in your prayers, and also those that are going to camp today, that they'll have a good, safe week. Is there anyone in particular that we need to keep in our thoughts and prayers? Yes, ma'am, and yes, ma'am.
Okay. Rick Riddle, the preacher down at Spanish Fort, we got an update on him. They finally got his blood levels up to 55. They did confirm pancreatic cancer that's metastasized. I can never say that word. They're working on keeping the blood coming up, which means the blood clot's under control, and then he'll get to go home and report in. He's going to start chemo. So don't know what is going to happen if it is stage 4, but they're going after it.
Yes, ma'am.
The Ingrams are back after Alicia's grandmother's funeral, but they've got at least one sick kid, which is why they're not here today.
Okay. Just more to the list. Anyone else? Brother Jeremy Claunch, would you lead us in a prayer, please?
We can bow. Father, we thank you for the opportunity this morning to come together now and study from your word, and for being able to worship you as well. Father, we ask that you be with us, help us to do it in a mind that is appropriate, open to what you have to teach. Help us to use what we learn to spread the gospel wherever we go. We ask prayers on all those that are sick. There are so many right now that each of us are aware of, and in many cases need your hand everywhere. Father, be with those of us who will be gone this week. Keep us safe. Help us to have a good week. Help us to do what we need to teach the gospel to those young minds. Father, we ask that you be with the congregation here. May we continue to work and to grow, to look for opportunities to spread the gospel, and to grow closer to one another as we grow closer to you. And in Christ's name, amen.
I want to thank Brother David Day for teaching class last week in my absence. We're not going to go over the material he went over because he did a good job. I did watch him on TV. But to tie that in with this week, if you get your map that's picked up from the banister outside, the first page of it, the black and white one, is just sort of an overview showing Elijah's travels. And I did 4 other maps because I can never find a map that tells everything that I want it to on the one map. So what I wanted to do is, if you'll look at the middle page, the top map says the nations of Israel. Well, this is right after they went in and the promised land was conquered and the tribes were divided up with the land. And if you'll notice that on the east side of the Jordan River, there was the tribe of Reuben, Gad, and half tribe of Manasseh. And then on the west side was the other half tribe of Manasseh and the other tribes. I did that because now we need to break it down a little farther. If you'll go down to the one where it says tribe of Gad, if you will look just about the middle of the page, you will see the place called Tishbe. And it's spelled several different ways, but this map has it with Tishbe. And this is Elijah the Tishbite, or this is where he was from, which was in the land of Gad. And if you'll look directly west of there, you'll see the tribe of Manasseh. And then if you'll go to the next page, under the tribe of Manasseh, the top of the map has Manasseh south. Well, the one on the east side of the river would have been Manasseh north, or sometimes they're referred to as east and west. But again, if you will look just about where you see the big word Manasseh, if you'll look just below that, you'll see the place called Samaria. And this was the capital that Omri had set up, Ahab's father. And then this is where a lot of the action was taking place, where the capital where Ahab was. And if you'll notice, it's almost directly west of the country of Gad, or where Elijah would have come from and then went back to, that Brother Day covered last week, where he went back and was fed by the ravens. And then also if you'll look down at the tribe of Issachar, now Issachar is the area that is just above Manasseh, and if you'll look at the very bottom of it, you'll see of the map of Issachar, you'll see Jezreel, and then you'll see the valley of Jezreel just to the north and west of there. And then from there, off the map, we'll have to go back to the black and white map. If you go back to the black and white map, and you'll go where you see Jezreel, number 8, and go west of there, you'll see Mount Carmel. And this is where we're going to be focusing on today. Is if you go directly north of that, you'll see Zarephath, which is where Brother Day got you last week, talking about the lady that was virtually starving, and then he saved her and her son. And chapter 18 and verse 1 picks up with them in Zarephath. So if you'll go into 1 Kings chapter 18, there's also one thing I want to do before we really get involved too deeply in this, and that is the story that we talked about last week, or Brother Day talked about last week, and we're going to talk about today, is really focusing on Elijah, but it's Elijah dealing with Ahab and with Jezebel. And a lot of people think that Ahab and Jezebel were the worst kings that Israel had, which is quite true. They were the most evil. But if you think about Ahab for a moment, anytime things got difficult for him, like when he couldn't get the vineyard that he wanted, what did he do? He went and sulked. And then Jezebel came in and took care of matters. So even though Ahab was the king and everything stopped with Ahab, if you'll go to 1 Kings chapter 21, 1 Kings chapter 21, in verse 25 and 26, I think you'll get a better picture of just what was going on here. It says, "But there was none like unto Ahab, which did sell himself to work wickedness in the sight of the Lord, whom Jezebel his wife stirred up. And he did very abominable in following idols according to all things, as did the Amorites, whom the Lord cast out before the children of Israel." So Jezebel was a very key person in Ahab's reign. If you recall, she was from the area of Sidon. She was a Phoenician, which was Baal worship, and she basically introduced Baal worship, or had Ahab make that the state religion, which we'll get into a little bit later when talking about some of the prophets. But Ahab may have been a totally different person if he had not married a woman like Ahab. A good woman is a great benefit to a man. A bad woman can make a man do things that he shouldn't ought to do. So just keep that in mind as we go through here. Chapter 18, verse 1. Came to pass after many days, now this is basically many days that Elijah was up in Zarephath, because if you go into the New Testament, we won't take time to turn there, but in Luke chapter 4 and also in the book of James chapter 5, it says that the period of time for the drought was 3.5 years. So here, chapter 18 in the last verse was talking about Elijah being in Zarephath, and now when many days were past, that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year. This is the 3rd year of the drought, saying, Go show thyself unto Ahab, and I will send rain unto the earth. Now, we've just talked about Ahab, and we've talked about Jezebel, and now we're going to talk about pagan worship just a little bit, and Baal worship, and Ashtoreth was one of the pagan gods there. But Jezebel was from that area, Sidon, which is just a little bit north of Zarephath, Phoenician Baal worship. But what was the primary worship of that image? What did they think that Baal would do? And this, to me, is very important. Well, agriculture and bring rain. So if he was the God that would bring rain, what had Elijah pronounced to him last week? You're going to have a drought. The God of Israel has told me you're going to have a drought, which is now putting him directly against the God of that they worshipped, Ahab and Jezebel worshiped. In verse 2, and Elijah went to show himself unto Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. And we just showed you where the city of Samaria was, that whole region. Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor of his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. How would you like to, or have you ever had to be in a place where your boss didn't agree with your religion and made it known and put you in a very bad predicament? Here, God, the God of Israel, because he knew what kind of people they were. Verse 4 says, For it was so, when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord, that Obadiah took 100 prophets, hid them by 50 in a cave, and fed them with bread and water. Now, this is in direct response to for Elijah telling them in last week's study that there was going to be a drought. Now Jezebel is taking revenge on the prophets of Israel and killing them. So Obadiah takes 100 of them and hides them in a cave. I want you to think for just a moment. How difficult would it be to take 100 people, hide them, and get them daily food? If you've studied much history, such as World War II and how the Jews were being hidden from the Nazis and some of the stories related there, you can get an image of it. But hiding 100 people in 2 caves, just feeding 100 people a day is a challenge. But Obadiah took that challenge on, and it wasn't for a day or two, because she would have started killing those prophets right away, and he would have hidden them. So he's had them hidden now for upwards of 3 years or so. So that was a challenge. Ahab said unto Obadiah, Go into the land, and to all fountains of water, and to all the brooks, peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we lose not all the beast. Now, the phrasing here is a little bit odd, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to lose any. It just means we're not going to lose all of them. Some of them we know are going to die, but let's save as many as we can. So they divided the land between them to pass throughout it. Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. And as Obadiah was in the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he knew him, and fell on his face, and said, Art thou that my Lord Elijah? This is just a way of recognizing that who he is. And he answered, I am. Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. Now, it gets very interesting at this point, because I've set the stage. What predicament is Obadiah in? Obadiah fears the Lord. Obadiah is in front of Elijah. What is Ahab and Jezebel wanting to do with Elijah? And now you put me in the position that I'm going to go tell the king that you're here? What's that old saying we use a lot of times? Don't shoot the messenger. So look what he says. And he said, What have I sinned that thou wouldst deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay me? So he sort of thinks, if I go tell Ahab and then Ahab comes back and you're gone again, I'm the one that's on the spot. You're setting me up to die. As the Lord thy God liveth, there is no nation or kingdom whither my Lord hath not sent to seek thee. And when they said, He is not there, he took an oath of the kingdom and nation that they found thee not. And now thou sayest, Go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from thee, that the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And so when I come and tell Ahab, and he cannot find thee, he will slay me. But I, thy servant, fear the Lord from my youth. Next verse is again crucial to this whole setup. Was it not told, my Lord, meaning you, Elijah, was it not told you what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. He's making a plea to Elijah. I fear the Lord. I respect you. Don't send me to die. Hadn't you heard what good I've done? That's it in a nutshell of what he is telling Elijah here. And then he says, Go tell the Lord, behold, Elijah is here, and he shall slay me. And then look what Elijah tells him. Elijah said, As the Lord of hosts liveth, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself unto him today. Well, about 3.5 years ago, when he told Ahab there was going to be a drought, God sent him away to the east side of the Jordan to hide out. Faith known for. They produced the idols of Baal at Zarephath. Archaeology, they have discovered and did several excavations around Zarephath, and they have found so far 22 smelting factories, places to melt the metals down to form the idols that they worshiped and all. So God sent him first back to the land of Gilead, near his hometown, but then sent him from there, and I suppose he sent him there because the brook had dried up, the water dried up, so he had to send him someplace else. So he sent him right into the heart of the pagan nation. Zarephath is approximately 14 miles south of Sidon, 8 miles north of Tyre, which is in the old Phoenicia, which is the center of Baal worship. And now he's bringing him back. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. Questions or comments so far?
Something that I always thought was amusing is you can tell how desperate it is when Ahab says, you go one way and I'm going to go this way. The king himself is out looking for water.
Food for the animals. Sort of desperate times, right?
Yep.
So it came to pass when Ahab saw Elijah that Ahab said unto him, Art thou he that troubleth Israel? Where have we heard that term before? He that troubleth. Well, that plus back into the book of Joshua, Achan. Why'd you trouble? So, and I love Elijah's response to it. He put the shoe on the correct foot. Elijah answered, I have not troubled Israel, but thou and thy father's house, in that ye have forsaken the commandments of the Lord, and thou hast followed Balaam. If you could be a mouse in the corner at that meeting, what do you think Ahab would be thinking right now? I'm the king, you dare talk to me this way? I don't think so because of what I've said earlier. I think Ahab is sort of one of those what people would call mealy. He bolsters a lot, but there's not much there. Jezebel's running the show. He's just sort of the front person. And then he told him, said, Now therefore send and gather to me all Israel unto Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal 450, and the prophets of the groves 400, which eat at Jezebel's table. You see, Ahab had 450 for the kingdom. Jezebel had 400 personal prophets of hers. And the term here, eat at her table, under Semitic rules, men would not have been eating at the queen's table. They could have been fed from the table, but not in her presence and eating in this situation. However, remember, Jezebel is a Baal worshiper, is a pagan. So it very possibly could be that those same Semitic rules wasn't in play at this time and that they were actually just, but I can't imagine 400 people getting together 3 times a day and eating a meal. It just, to me, it's not logical, but that's where we are. And also we'll notice that later on when they get together that Jezebel and her 400 do not participate in the activity. That's just a teaser for what's coming up. So Ahab sent unto all the children of Israel, gathered all the prophets together unto Carmel, and Elijah came unto all the people and said, How long halt ye between 2 opinions? There is sort of an archaic word, a 19th century word, equipoise, that I think is more fitting for this situation than what we just read. Anybody give me the definition of equipoise?
That's a fancy word for sitting on the fence.
That's a fancy word for sitting on the fence trying to balance. bring things into balance. Now, why do I say that would be an appropriate word for this situation? Why were they on the fence? What were they trying to balance? They knew what was right. They knew they should be following the God of Israel, the God. But they also had to appease Ahab and Jezebel, because what would happen to them if they didn't? They'd die. They'd get killed. So it put them in a sort of a tenuous situation of how can I do what I know I need to do, but yet save my life? Yes, sir.
I think that's being too generous to the people of Israel. I mean, there's so many of them. They can choose their king, their queen. You know, they're allowing this reign to be over them. If they truly believed in God, it wasn't just fear of retribution that caused them to go after Baal. They liked it. They'd shown multiple times their tendency to go toward these other gods and all of the partying and the different types of freedom, quote unquote, that those different gods and those types of worship allow them.
We see time and time again, as you say in the Old Testament, where things are going great and then they choose to do something different. And then when it reaches a certain point and they find out we made a mistake, now they have to try to get back the other way. So, yes, sir.
We tend to do that same on the fence sometimes. At least I know some people that tend to, family comes into town that aren't Christians, like, you know, particular person I know, grandmother, grandfather comes to town, Baptist. Make them happy, they'll go to church, at the Baptist church for them while they're in town. You know, to keep things cordial, I guess you'd say. Knowing it's not right.
That's correct.
Who do you want to make happy?
Well, I personally want to make God happy.
Correct.
So we see that throughout, you know, whether it's just culture in general, but also us as Christians, us as people. You know, there's always that idea of the warring between God's will and our will. You know, obviously, there's a choice that has to be made there. And I think so often we make the wrong choice and we tend to try to justify it for various reasons or in various ways, even though we know that's not the right thing. That's what the Israelites have done here. I like the ESV. He asked them, how long will you go limping between two different opinions? And we see that term limping used again in ESV. It was talking about the prophets of Baal after they've been kind of working their way around this altar for so long. You know, that's where the Israelites were. They had weakened themselves to the point of inefficacy because of their inability to make a decision to follow God and stick with Him. They had cut themselves down time and time again and divided a nation and done all these other things because of their inability to just stick with God.
And what happens most of the time is the weak follow the stronger leader, even if that leader is not doing the right thing. So here what they were sorely needing was Elijah to come on the scene, get them back on the straight path. So between two opinions, yes, sir.
Sorry, I didn't catch it earlier. It's another illustration of God using, and we use the word broken people, because you look at Elijah, he's despondent, you know, before this, but he still comes on the scene and does what he's supposed to do because that's what God told him to do. I constantly find myself, when we're studying this portion of Israelite history, find day-to-day applications. You know, we often look at our lives and go, I've got so much going on right now, I can't handle anymore until God gives us a job. You know, and then suddenly things seem to even out. I guess the point I'm trying to make is sometimes even when it's difficult, we need to do what we're supposed to do and watch God work through us.
rest of that verse then says, if the Lord be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word. This goes along with what both of you were saying here, is they're still not convinced at this point that they need to turn and do the right thing. Then Elijah said unto the people, I, even I only, remain a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets are 450 men. He's outnumbered now 450 to 1. Let them therefore give us 2 bullocks, and let them choose 1 bullock for themselves, cut it in pieces, and lay it on wood, put no fire under it, and I will dress the other bullock and lay it on wood, and put no fire under. And call ye on the name of your gods, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and the God that answereth by fire, let him be God. And all the people answered and said, It is well spoken. Show me a sign. Winner take all. Elijah said unto the prophet of Baal, Choose you 1 bullock for yourselves, dress it, for ye are many, and call on the name of your gods, but put no fire under it. Why do you think Elijah gave them first choice?
Make sure that it wasn't in their minds tilted one way or the other.
Make sure that everything was on the up and up. You choose. So they took the bull that was given them, dressed it, called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, saying, O Baal, hear us, for there was no voice, nor any that answered. And they leaped upon the altar which was made. And it came to pass at noon that Elijah mocked them and said, Cry aloud, for he is a god. Either he is talking, or he is pursuing, or he is on a journey, or peradventure he sleepeth and must be awakened. So Elijah was, what the word here, mocked. I prefer the word goaded. He was sort of picking at him and prodding him to, hey, your God is so great, why hadn't he answered you yet? Is he taking a nap? What's going on? Yell a little louder. Jump a little more. So they cried, yeah.
We refer to that as trash talk.
Trash talk, okay. Getting in their face, trash talk.
I wonder how much of this he is just giving them back with a little bit of interest. You know, because what have they said about God doing?
Yep. And they cried aloud and cut themselves after their manner with knives and lancets. Lancets here is not what we think of as a lancet today in medical terms. It would be a javelin or a spear type weapon, but they were cutting themselves till blood gushed out upon them. And it came to pass when midday was past, and they prophesied until the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice, and there was neither voice nor any to answer, nor any that regarded. The time of evening sacrifice would have probably been the 9 o'clock hour or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So here they had been from about mid-morning, 9 a.m. to about noontime, trying to get Baal to answer them and burn the sacrifice. And then at noontime, after they'd been goaded a little bit, they intensified that for another 3 hours. So here they have been for about 6 hours trying to get an idol's attention to do something for them. So it came to pass then, and Elijah said unto all the people, Come near unto me. And all the people came near, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that was broken down. This is probably the one that Saul had been using in that area at the high place for legitimate purposes, but now it's destroyed, so he's putting it back together. Elijah took 12 stones representing the 12 tribes. This is bringing back the unity of it. Saying, Israel shall be thy name. And with the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, made a trench about the altar as great as would contain 2 measures of seed, or seah. Anybody know how much water that would, or that trench would hold? About 6 gallons. Put the wood in order, cut the bull in pieces, laid it on the wood, and said, "Fill your barrels with water," or pitchers with water, "and pour it on the burnt sacrifice and on the wood." And he said, "Do it the second time," and they did it a second. He said, "Do it a third," and they did it a third. And the water ran about the altar, and he filled the trench also with fire. Why would he do that? Goes back to what Brother Kevin said. It was to prove a point that, see, they had ways of using a little magic back in those days where there could have been a hole under that altar that he built with a little fire that some strange stuff could go on. But now with him basically soaking the sacrifice and the wood and water still standing, and that's going to be an important part a little bit later here as we'll look at it too. So we did all that. Put it all together. And then verse 36, it came to pass at the time of the offering of the evening sacrifice that Elijah the prophet came near and said, "Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and of Israel." To me, that is important because who is Elijah representing? Israel. And who is the God of Israel? They always refer to it in that manner, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So he's just putting it back to them who he's talking about. "And let it be known this day that thou art God in Israel, and that I am thy servant, and that I have done all these things at thy word." So he's letting all these folks know exactly what was going on. "Hear me, O Lord, hear me, that this people may know that thou art the Lord God, and that thou hast turned their heart back again." We're going to go through this next section point by point because I think it's very important based on what Kevin has already said and Jeremy already said about proving that there is nothing fishy going on, that there's no trickery involved here. Because as we look at it, it said, "Then the fire of the Lord fell." Didn't start a fire under the sacrifice. The fire came down. How could it come down except it be actually God involved? And consumed the burnt sacrifice. Didn't bother the wood. Didn't bother anything else. The first thing it did, it fell and it consumed the burnt, the sacrifice, the meat offering. Then it took care of the wood. Then it took care of the stone. How hot would a fire have to be to take care of stone? And our engineer over here is going to tell me it depends on what kind of stone. But roughly in general, how hot would a fire have to be to destroy stone?
Well, the difference is it didn't say that it liquefied it, it consumed it.
It said it consumed it. So you're getting in the range of 3,000 plus degrees. So, and then not only the stone, but it consumed the dust. So the fire fell down, consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stone, the dust. And then it licked up the water. A very concentrated, deliberate, staged event. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their face and they said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is the God. And Elijah said unto them, take the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they took them, and Elijah brought them down to the brook Kishon and slew them there. Now, he probably was not the one that went around to 450 and killed all of them, but by his command, they were killed or destroyed. Yes, sir.
The sacrifice, and the water and all that, there was absolutely nothing left.
Nothing left. Took care of all of it.
I guess I always had it pictured in my mind that the fire came down and it was all gone like that. You know, I don't know, maybe reading between the lines a bit to add the thens, you know, the fact that it was maybe staged out is, you know, maybe possible, but I guess I've always just imagined it being so severe, so fierce that it just, woof, you know, it's all gone, just like that, you know. Clearly God's power.
Well, you may be right. I just think it would have made more of an impact the way I lined it out. But either way, it was totally destroyed, and the people now believed. But then Elijah told Ahab to get up and eat and go, and I'm running out of time, but the rest of the story, 42 through the end of the verse, is Ahab is going to get on his chariot and head back to Jezreel to be with Jezebel. And Elijah went up to the top of the mountain, prayed for rain, sent his servant up to the top of the mountain to look out over the Mediterranean Sea to see the rain clouds coming in. And then Elijah jumped up and ran from where he was to the gate of Jezreel before Ahab got there. Distance-wise, that is about a 16-mile run in mountains. Today, that would be tough on us, but back in those days when they did everything on foot anyway, it was probably just a stretch of the legs. But anyway, that was just trying to put things in a little perspective. So the last verse then, and the hand of the Lord was on Elijah. He girded his loins and ran before Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. Questions or comments then on chapter 18? Questions or comments that Brother David can answer from last week's lesson?
I do think Jeremy touched on it in his sermon Sunday night, but that run might have been a miracle also, that he actually beat him there from his chariot.
Well, where it says in that last verse, he girded up his loins and ran before Ahab. The hand of the Lord was on Elijah. There are some translations that instead of saying the hand of the Lord, it was that Elijah was strengthened. So by God's hand, Elijah is strengthened to do whatever he needs to do. Anything else?
Curious what Jezebel was going to do about this whole situation.
Curious about what Jezebel?
Was going to do.
Well, following chapters, we got time, we don't have time to study it, but the following chapters, she tells Elijah she's going to kill him.
She had representatives there as well. It wasn't just the 450. She had 400 of her own prophets, whatever it is. So there were 850 altogether.
Well, but it doesn't say that they were there, does it? He was told to go get that many, but he's only told to round up the 450 to kill them. Bell rang. We're going to look at that one a little further and pick up there next week. Thank y'all so much.